We are jumping straight into the source material today, analyzing a really fascinating paper.
It's titled Terrain Diffusion, a diffusion-based successor to Perlin noise in infinite real-time terrain generation.
And this is a must-read for anyone in, say, game engine design or procedural generation.
Absolutely. Because for decades, procedural noise, like Perlin or Simplex, it's been the go-to for infinite worlds, but it just fails at realism. It's great at making textures, not geology.
Right. And then you have diffusion models, which completely solve the realism problem. They give us these stunning structured landforms, but they've always been slow and bounded. They work on a fixed canvas.
So the big insight of terrain diffusion is that it bridges this gap. It is the first learned system that can synthesize entire planets and do it coherently while holding on to those three indispensable properties of the classic methods.
Seamless infinite extent, seed consistency.
And maybe the most crucial one, constant time random access.
So we're talking about streaming an entire planet in real time on a consumer GPU.
We are. The core of it is a new algorithm called InfiniteDiffusion. It's basically an extension of multi-diffusion, but for unbounded domains. You combine that with a very smart hierarchical stack of models and a stabilization trick called Laplacian encoding.
Which all means that diffusion is moving from just being a slow, high-quality asset generator to a practical, scalable foundation for world building. So let's unpack how they managed to make infinity. Well, tractable. Okay, so when we talk about procedural noise, we are talking about techniques that are almost 40 years old. They've dominated 3D graphics forever. Why were things like Perlin and Simplex so sticky for so long?
It really comes down to those three properties. They were incredibly lightweight, super fast, and they offered seed consistency.
Meaning you could generate the exact same infinite world from just a tiny random number.
Exactly. And they had seamless infinite extensibility, so the world genuinely never had an edge. But most critically, for any interactive world, they offered constant time random access.
You could just instantly ask for the elevation at any point on the map without having to compute everything in between.
Yes. That's why they were the bedrock of procedural generation. So elegant, so fast. But, as fidelity demands just kept growing, the limitations became really glaring.
The issue is scale, right, and structure.
It is. Procedural noise is designed to make these smooth, sort of repetitive, texture-like patterns. It's fine for a small patch of bumpy ground, but it just fundamentally lacks the complex, multi-scale hierarchical organization of real geography.
You don't get these massive branching river basins or continents that feel like they were shaped by tectonic plates.
No. You end up with a smooth, modeled world that, as the paper puts it, looks plausible, but it never ever looks real. It's missing that geological structure.
So Terrain Diffusion's goal was to bring the power of deep learning, specifically diffusion, to this problem, but without throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
They had to create an AI-era successor that would generate these structured high-fidelity landforms, but keep that infinite access and speed. That was the whole mission. The starting point for their whole mechanism is multi-diffusion.
Right, which is the idea of breaking a big image into lots of overlapping windows.
Exactly. You have the model predict each little window, and then you just average the predictions in the areas where they overlap. It forces the final output to be perfectly seamless.
But standard multi-diffusion, it still needs you to define your canvas size up front. It's a big canvas, but it's finite. So how did they make the leap from a large bounded canvas to a truly infinite one?
That's where infinite diffusion comes in. Mathematically, they define the operation not over a finite grid, but over z times c.
Which, for anyone not staring at the math, means what exactly?
It means it's an infinite discrete grid. The genius here is recognizing that while the theoretical domain is infinite, any single query you make is always finite.
So the engine itself never has to think about boundaries.
Never. The system just understands that data exists at every single integer coordinate, no matter how far out you fly. It handles all the coordination of that infinite space.
Okay, but an infinite input space sounds like it would need infinite compute. How do they actually make that practical?
They use lazy evaluation and caching. When a user queries a finite region, let's call it $3, the algorithm only runs the diffusion process on the specific windows it needs to build that region $3. It doesn't generate a single pixel more than it has to.
It's like a generative on-demand system.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And for efficiency, it manages two conceptually infinite tensors. There's weight of knowledge for the accumulated output and beta gunner for the weighting mask.
Wait, infinite tensors, how does that work in memory?
Well, they're conceptual. In practice, they're stored as sparse tiles. so they're memory conserving. Tiles are loaded and unloaded dynamically, which means the system caches or memoizes intermediate results.
So if you move the camera back and forth over the same spot,
The expensive initial computation is just reused. You don't pay that cost again.
and that brings us to the formal guarantee of the system, seed consistency.
Yes, because that whole query routine, the window selection, the averaging, it's all completely deterministic and order invariant. So the output for any given region is fixed by the initial random seed.
Meaning, if you query a region now, or 3 hours from now, you get the exact same result down to the floating point.
Correct. Now let's talk about the other critical property, constant time random access. That O1 theorem sounds kind of revolutionary.
It's the ultimate procedural property. Theorem 8.7 in the appendix proves that accessing any window-sized region is $O. The cost is constant. It doesn't matter where you are.
Wait, how can that actually be true? If I jump 1 billion miles away, is the time truly the same as jumping 1 meter? There has to be some overhead.
The mathematical complexity is overfiner because the computational cost is defined by the fixed size of the window and the number of steps. You're not forced to compute all the regions in between.
I see. So the location only changes which tiles get loaded, not how hard the calculation is.
Exactly. That's the power of their constant memory tiled framework. But there's a major practical limitation they talk about.
Yeah.
The recursive growth issue.
Yes, the OT3 time complexity.
Right. What's happening there?
Well, to enforce that coherence through averaging, computing the output at step 2 needs a slightly larger region from the previous step, 2 plus $1. So the area you need to compute grows quadratically with the number of diffusion steps, $2.
And the overall complexity becomes cubed, only $3, which means you just can't afford a deep noise schedule.
Precisely. You can't use the full 1,000-step diffusion process you see in image generation. In practice, $2 is limited to maybe 1 or 2 steps to keep it interactive.
But they still get high-fidelity results.
They do, because the global coherence is handled by the conditioning from the hierarchy, and the models are trained to be translation invariant, which minimizes seams even with just a little refinement.
And none of this would work without the infrastructure they built in open source.
The infinite-tensor framework, yeah. It's a Python library that basically acts as the memory abstraction layer. It lets standard PyTorch models treat these huge tiled images as if they were just simple, normal tensors.
Okay, let's switch gears to how they got the realism. High-quality generation needs high-quality data. What did they feed these models?
They built a pretty comprehensive global data set. It's got Merit-Dim for land elevation, Edo-Pio for the ocean floor.
Which they had to blur and upsample, right?
They did, to match the resolution. And critically, they included world clim data for things like temperature and precipitation.
Yeah.
They processed all of this into 2048 by 2048 equal area tiles at about 90-meter resolution.
And they introduced a pretty significant training bias.
A huge bias. They made sure that 99% of the training tiles had at least some land in them. Pure ocean is, relatively easy to generate, so they wanted to focus the model's capacity on learning complex landforms and coastlines.
That makes sense. But the biggest challenge in that data has to be the dynamic range. You're going from, 10,000 meters high to thousands of meters deep in the ocean.
And that massive variance creates a really uneven effective signal-to-noise ratio. If you use a fixed noise schedule, the noise can completely drown out little details in, say, a coastal area, but barely even register on a massive mountain.
And their fix for this was really clever, the sine square root transform.
It's a classic signal processing trick. Zeta maps to sine. It just compresses the extreme values, the super high and super low elevations.
So it normalizes the variance across the whole data set.
Exactly. It distributes the variance more uniformly. And that means the model can focus its generative power on small but critical features.
What's the practical outcome of that?
Well, figure 3 in the paper shows it really well. The variance becomes much more uniform relative to the mean. For us, it means the model can synthesize these sharp, defined features, like small river cuts or stable coastlines, without them getting washed out by the noise scale needed for the giant mountains.
But even with that, when you convert back to raw meters, a small error in the model could still become a massive real-world error, like a 25-meter error on Mount Everest.
And that's where the most ingenious part comes in. Stabilization via Laplacian encoding. Instead of training the model to predict the raw elevation,
It predicts something else.
it predicts a Laplacian-based representation. So you have a low-frequency component, the blurred large-scale structure, and then a residual high-frequency component with all the local detail.
So it's kind of like separating the overall lighting of a room from the sharpness of the objects in it. How does that stop large errors?
The magic is in the re-extraction step. After the model generates an initial height map, they deliberately blur and downsample that output again, just to re-isolate a clean version of the low-frequency structure.
Ah, so they're forcing the large-scale structure to be correct, reminding the model what it's supposed to be doing at that coarse level.
Exactly. Any big low-frequency error that crept in during the diffusion steps gets wiped out by this re-extraction. But all the high-frequency detail, the actual mountains and valleys, is preserved in the residual. It just anchors the whole thing.
And the quantitative impact was massive. This one stabilization step dropped the FID score of their model from 23.21 all the way down to 9.33.
It's a huge gain in stability and realism. Absolutely crucial.
We've mentioned the scale issue a few times. Single-pass generation is just not going to work when you're dealing with both continental structure and meter-level detail. How does the hierarchy solve this?
It creates a structured context. It's a strict three-stage hierarchy that basically unifies the planetary context from the top layer with the local realism from the bottom layer.
Yeah.
It's all about forcing global coherence.
So let's look at stage one, the coarse planetary model. What's its role?
Its only job is structural guidance. It establishes that large-scale context where the continents are, the general shape of the land, the climate zones.
And this can be initialized from something really simple, like Perlin noise or even a user's sketch.
Right. And it outputs a set of coarse conditioning variables. I mean, elevation, 5th percentile elevation, a binary landmass, and the climate inputs. But the really fascinating part is the architecture.
The intentional limitation.
Yes, it uses an EDM2 backbone, but they removed all the downsampling and upsampling layers.
Which seems so counterintuitive. Why would you limit the receptive field of your coarse model?
It's a bit of engineering finesse. By limiting its receptive field, they prevent the model from learning to just override the user's input. It can't generate its own continents. It can only make strong local corrections and refinements to the guidance it's given. It becomes a powerful local conditioner, not a global generator.
Smart. So then, moving down the stack, we get to stage 2, the core latent diffusion model, and stage 3, the consistency decoder.
Stage 2 is where the heavy lifting happens. It synthesizes these 512 by 512 patches, which are about 46-kilometer tiles, but in a low-dimensional latent space. And it's heavily conditioned on the output from that stage 1 model.
And then the stage 3 consistency decoder just expands those latents into the final high-fidelity 90-meter elevation map.
Correct. And I love that they even added a quality knob. They trained a linear regressor on hand-labeled data to give tiles a beauty score.
So users can actually dial in the kind of terrain they want.
Yeah, you can bias a generator towards more striking dramatic canyons or, force it towards more mundane rolling hills if that's what your application needs. It's a great bit of creative control.
And given the whole OGT3 complexity thing, which forces short noise schedules, how did they get the speed needed for real time?
Distillation. All the models, except that first coarse one, were distilled into continuous time consistency models. They use techniques like SEM and auto-guidance. That's the key that lets diffusion go from a slow, iterative process to a single, rapid synthesis step.
Without that, real-time traversal would be off the table.
Completely impossible.
Okay, so let's look at the payoff. On an RTX 3090 Ti, the final tiled consistency FID 50K was 17.87. But the streaming latency numbers are what really matter for a real-world application.
Right. They reported the time to first tile, the TTFT, at about 7.6 seconds. That's the initial startup cost. But for continuous travel, the time to second tile, or TTST, dropped to just 2.4 seconds.
And TTST is the crucial metric because that's your traversal speed. It shows how fast the system can keep up once it's running.
And the paper gives this brilliant validation for that number. They calculated that a high-speed jet like an F-35 would take about 84 seconds to cross one of these 46-kilometer tiles.
Okay.
In that same 84 seconds, Terrain Diffusion can generate and stream 35 additional tiles.
Wow. That's a massive validation. It proves that the generative process, even with diffusion models, is no longer the bottleneck. It can easily keep up with real-time exploration.
And the qualitative results, they match the speed. If you look at Figure 5, you see these sharp, coherent mountain ridges that transition perfectly across tile boundaries. You see volcanic structures, huge canyons, all generated without any visible tiling artifacts.
It confirms the infinite diffusion mechanism actually works in practice.
It does. And the ultimate test of utility was plugging it directly into the Minecraft engine.
The perfect showcase.
It really is. They just replaced the native world generator and streamed this high-fidelity terrain in real time.
Yeah.
It just works. It's a demonstration of immediate, practical utility that can go right ahead and supersede traditional methods.
But the structural realism is the real key here. It's not just pretty noise, it's land that makes sense.
Exactly. The paper really emphasizes the high degree of hydrological consistency. The terrain aligns plausibly with the climate inputs. The valleys and river networks reflect natural erosion patterns. It captures a level of structured complexity that simple procedural noise could just never hope to achieve. Hashtag tag tag outro.
So to wrap up, this deep dive really confirms that Terrain Diffusion has delivered a high-fidelity, modern alternative to Perlin noise. It's got the stunning realism from diffusion, but it critically maintains the speed, the seed consistency, and the random access that you need for infinite worlds.
But there is still one main limitation, and it's right at the top of that hierarchy. The global coherence still relies on the structure provided by that top layer.
Which is currently just simple procedural noise or basic user input.
Right. So if you were to move this framework to a domain where a simple procedural prior isn't good enough, say generating vast structured underground cave systems or something, that top layer becomes a problem.
You'd need a new solution for that coarse global structure.
You would. Replacing that simple prior with a learned generator that still gives you high user control.
Yeah.
That's still an open research area.
Yeah.
They mentioned trying padding-free JANs, but the results were just comparable to Perlin and you lost a lot of the user control.
But if we step back, the core innovation here, the infinite diffusion formulation itself, is totally domain agnostic.
It is. I mean, this whole framework of constant time, seed-consistent, unbounded generation could be applied anywhere you have large-scale tiled domains. We've been focused on terrain, but just imagine applying this to infinitely detailed 2D textures or complex procedural city maps.
Or even something like vast, highly structured molecular simulation.
Exactly. The idea of having constant time random access to an infinite learned domain, that's the truly provocative thought to leave people with.